All you have to do is think, and they'll grow.
You are now tuned in to the Cracked Nation. I'm Caleb Henry. I'm here with Tyler Robbins, and we are on our last show of the year. We've had a ton of fun. We thank you guys for listening. And so to close it out, we're going to talk about the greatest movie ever made. And we'll talk more than just the number one greatest. We'll probably talk top 5 greatest ever. We've gone through a whole bunch of lists online from sources that people trust, and then we've also put down our own personal lists. So we're going to jump right in. And if you want to tweet in, feel free, please do, at @TheCrazy and at @Cracked_Nation. You can also hit us up on Facebook and on YouTube at /TheCrackednation on both. So let's just jump right in, Tyler.
All right.
I think I'm going to go ahead and start with IMDb's top 5 movies.
Have at it.
Because IMDb, if people don't know, is Internet Movie Database, and it's voted by the average person. Anybody can go on there, create an account, and vote on movies, what they're rated. So these have no credibility when it comes to, like, critics. Because critics choose, but I can guarantee you that some of the ones that are in the top 10 or 20 are not on any critic's top 100. So
Really?
Oh, there's definitely some on there.
In the top 10 or 20 that would not crack a critic's top 100?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's hear about your top
Two
5.
Towers would probably be one of them. I think Two Towers is actually 24th on IMDb, but it wouldn't be in any critic's top. So we're going to go ahead and go IMDb's top 5, just to start off. At number 5, we have The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I think is a good place for it to be.
Yeah.
Solid movie, but I don't think it's one of the 5 greatest movies ever.
Right.
Pulp Fiction at number 4.
That's very much got at least a place to debate whether it's top 5 or not. I mean, it's hard to compare Tarantino's work with, Scorsese or anything done in the 1940s, the 1950s, but the uniqueness of that movie, the ability to bring the cast together where everything complements everything else, the story, that's definitely got a legitimate argument to make.
I definitely agree, and it's not on my personal top 5.
Right.
But I thought about it for a minute. I was like, But I think because it came out in the 90s, I couldn't quite put it above some of the ones that are before it.
Right.
But we'll keep going here. Number 3 and number 2 on IMDb are Godfather Part 2 and Godfather Part 1.
Okay.
Respectively. I mean,
right.
Couldn't really complain there. And then Shawshank Redemption is number 1 on IMDb.
Right.
I think that Shawshank is by far, when it comes to the average person, I totally see why it's voted that high.
Right.
Everybody likes that movie. Nobody doesn't. If I said that, is that a word? Nobody doesn't? I think it's a double negative. Well, whatever.
I don't think that you can't say that.
Yeah. Anyways, so...
You can't not say that.
I can't not. Okay. Anyways, moving on. So that was IMDb's top 5. Now, that's usually what people look at when they talk greatest movies of all time. They go on IMDb, look at the top 250 movies, and roll down the list.
Right.
That's kind of the general consensus. Well, I asked on Facebook, and I got quite a few responses to greatest movie of all time. So I'm going to go ahead and list off what they said. Okay. This kind of goes along with IMDb because it's just fan choice.
All right. Are you going to list off who sent the...
I can't remember because there were quite a few people sent each one. There were a few I remember.
Okay.
I've mentioned before my friend Matthew Walker. I've mentioned him on here quite a bit.
Of course.
He said Apocalypse Now. And
that's definitely a legitimate...
Definitely. Believe it or not, Roger Ebert has Apocalypse Now in his 10 greatest movies ever made.
I totally believe it.
And he does not have The Godfather.
That surprises me.
Yeah, he says that they're both worthy of it, but he felt like Apocalypse Now was the better one of the two. And I was like, you know what? If he's going to say it, okay. So Apocalypse Now is on this list with 2 votes. Shawshank Redemption has 6 votes from my friends. Because what I did is if somebody said a movie and it got like 6 likes, I counted all those as votes for it.
Okay.
So some of these might be double, like, who knows? I don't really care. It's kind of it doesn't really matter.
We're not exactly running a scientific survey here.
Exactly. And so Shawshank Redemption had 6. V for Vendetta had 3.
Now that surprises me.
That really, really surprised me. I think that was more of a personal favorite.
Yeah.
Because that one and Hot Rod, which had 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So that one was more of a favorite.
Can I just call BS and say that some of these were put on sarcastically?
Oh, yeah.
And people jumped on the sarcasm train?
Yeah, that one definitely. But here are 3 serious ones. My friend Stephen Palawa, who has a YouTube channel that I watch, and he subscribed to me, and we're friends on Facebook. He said E.T. because he felt like when it came out and everything about it could definitely make it one of the greatest movies ever made. And I'm not going to argue. I personally am not a fan of the movie. I didn't like it. I was scared when I watched it when I was little, but definitely worth consideration. And then the top two were Forrest Gump, which had 7 votes for it, which no argument there. And the number 1 was The Princess Bride, which had 8.
See, I'm not sure that I would put that top 5. All best movies of all time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't put it top 5 best movies of all time.
Yeah.
But that's definitely, I mean, if you're making me do a top 25 list, definitely a top 100 list, it's on there.
Definitely.
I mean, that's a movie that, it's an outstanding movie. I absolutely love it. It was on my top 10 favorite movies list when we did that show a couple of weeks ago. I just cannot justify putting it in the top 5 greatest movies of all time.
No.
When you're putting it up against Godfather 1 and 2, you're putting it up against Apocalypse Now, and I haven't even got out of Coppola yet.
Yeah, that's just Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah.
So
you could even put Godfather Part 3 potentially above it.
No, you can't.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay.
Forget what Caleb just said.
Yeah. Scratch the last 10 seconds.
Go
you
home.
Did
Nobody
not
likes you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go to Rotten Tomatoes now.
Okay.
And look at Rotten Tomatoes top 5. Now, the way Rotten Tomatoes does it is they take which one was voted highest tomato rating and then which one received the most highest ratings. So their list is a little odd.
Right.
There's actually only 2 movies on here or 3 movies I've even heard of. Number 1, or I'm going to start at number 5. Number 5 is The Godfather.
Okay.
Rightfully so. Number 4 is The Interpreters.
The Interpreters.
Yeah.
Now, who is in that?
I'm sorry. The Interrupters.
The Interrupters.
The Interrupters. Never heard of it. No idea who's in it.
Okay.
I saw that and I was like, okay. So I'm just going to move on from there. Number 3 was Taxi to the Dark Side. Again, never heard of it.
Taxi to the Dark Side.
Yeah, this is weird that movies that I've never heard of are this high on their list. And then number 2 was Man on Wire.
Okay, I have heard of that.
Me too. And I really want to see it, but I never have.
It's a documentary, for those who don't know, about a man that crossed, I think it's from one World Trade Center tower to the other when they were still standing, on a piece of wire, without any aid, without any net. And the whole thing is like a documentary about his training kind of leading up to that. And, I mean, it sounded boring when I heard about it, but then it got some of the best reviews out of any documentary I've ever seen.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's on my to-watch list. It's not a movie I've seen yet, but it sounds really interesting, just given the fact that it's gotten the praise that it has.
Right. And then number 1, this you're not going to guess. You could have 100 guesses, you never guess. Toy Story 2. Yeah.
See, that... I'm totally not surprised that a movie from Toy Story is on the list.
Right.
I'm not. I'm surprised that it's 2 rather than 1 or 3.
Agreed.
Because I've heard people argue that 3 is better than 1. I've heard people that argue that 1 is the best of the 3. I've never heard a legitimate argument before just now for 2 being ahead of the first and third installments. It's just, I mean, it's a fantastic movie, but I've never thought that it was on the same level.
Yeah.
So
Neither
it's surprising to me personally.
It's my least favorite one of them too.
Right. Yeah, it's mine as well. Just a little bit too emotional in the parts where they're singing with the female cowboy that's out in the cowgirl.
Okay.
It's out by the box.
I get you.
Brings deep feels.
Okay, moving on. I'm just going to read off Ebert's top 10 list. He did not have them ranked 1 through 10.
Okay.
But Roger Ebert, greatest film critic of all time.
Right.
Rest in peace. Here's his list. I'm just going to list them off, and then we can talk about them.
Okay.
Apocalypse Now.
Not surprising at all.
Nope. Aguirre, Wrath of God. I don't know what it's about or anything.
Is that a foreign film,
I believe it is, yeah.
Okay.
Citizen Kane.
Of course.
Oh, Decalogue, I think is the name of it. And then La Dolce Vita.
Okay.
The General.
La Dolce Vita.
Yeah, that one.
The Sweet Life.
Sure. The General, Raging Bull, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Tokyo Story, and Vertigo. Yeah. I was like, okay, and he gives a reason on his website of why he voted Raging Bull above Taxi Driver. He just felt like it was more personal and a better use of like camera work and all that. Makes sense. And then also, he said La Dolce Vita is not 8.5 is usually considered that director's best movie. Mm-hmm. And he said you have a total argument, or you have a good argument if you pick that one, but he personally picked this one. So some great movies on there. The Godfather not being on there is what shocked me.
See, it's surprising to me at first, initial reaction, but the more I think about it, he's never been a huge Godfather fan in terms of when the movie initially came out, he gave it like 3 stars or something out of a possible 4. Yeah, I mean he called it a good movie, but he said that he certainly didn't say it was going to be an all-time classic. Mm-hmm. And I mean, looking back on it, I saw something where he was kind of going back and changing rankings that he had given out initially on movies, saying with X number of years of retrospect to look back,
right?
I would like to change these. I think that he took away some of the praise that he had given to The Graduate, and there were a few other movies. They asked him about The Godfather, and he said no. So I think 3 stars is still where it belongs.
Really, because he put it on his great movies list.
Yeah, I mean he might have moved it up to 3.5. I remember he did not move it up to 4 stars.
Really? Okay.
That was the thing that shocked me. I thought, if it's not in your top 10, I totally understand that, but I'm surprised that it's not in your at least 4 stars.
Right.
Because a lot of, especially in his later years, I feel like he became an easier grader of movies.
Yeah. He became less harsh. He used to be like a stickler for a 4-star. You would never see a 4-star.
Yeah, I mean, if a 4-star came out, that was a once every few years kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And like Apocalypse Now, that would be a 4-star movie, and then you might have to wait until, well, I guess you wouldn't have to wait that long because Raging Bull came out the next year. But,
right.
Yeah, I mean, he was a lot harsher earlier on, and so I'm really surprised. I'm not surprised he got 3 stars from him initially. I'm surprised that he didn't go back and say, you know what? I'll give that 4 stars. It deserves a high ranking.
Right.
And there's some of these movies that, I mean, and it's a personal thing. I mean, it's like you're not overly in love with Shawshank Redemption.
Yep.
And I absolutely love the movie. I would probably put it in. It would be right on the border of my top 10 favorite movies.
Okay. Because when we talked about it, you mentioned you picked 8 Mile, The Green Mile.
Right.
Over Shawshank, but
and I stand by that, but that's me personally.
Right.
If I'm picking quality based, then Shawshank gets that every time.
Right, absolutely. And then one movie that he said of recent film that would make his list that was barely left off was The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick.
Oh wow.
And I was very surprised that movie made Ebert's top 10 of all time.
I mean,
or almost made it.
Well, I mean, anytime you see a new movie on the greatest movies of all time list, then that's kind of surprising. But truth be told, anything by Terrence Malick is absolutely perfect in what he wants it to be.
Right.
And so I'm not really all that surprised that he would have one on his honorable mention list.
Okay.
I really even wouldn't be that surprised if he put it on his top 10.
Yeah, well, I mean it was close.
I mean, some of these movies are, fairly recent.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
Yeah. So
okay.
What's the next, I guess?
The next list, I have AFI's list and then EmpireMagazine.com.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to Empire first.
Good source. Good source.
It's not like the greatest film source, but
it's very respectable.
It's respectable, exactly.
When they release a review on a movie, then people pay attention to that.
Right. So at number 5, we have the only Steven Spielberg movie, or not actually the only Steven Spielberg movie so far, but the first one is Jaws.
Okay.
And, no. I don't think it's that good. I truly like the movie, and I totally understand it, but, I mean, really, top 5 of all time?
Well, you have to look back on kind of what it did for its day and age.
Right. I mean, it was 74.
Right.
Which is really old now.
Right. I mean, next year that'll be a 40-year-old movie.
Oh man, the 40th anniversary edition will come out,
Yeah,
which means I'll probably buy it on Blu-ray.
it'll probably come out in 3D remastered.
Oh dear.
That would be a cool movie to watch in 3D.
Yeah.
Saw the 20th anniversary edition of Jurassic Park
Oh, yeah.
in 3D, and that was cool.
Okay.
Jeremy Johns said that it was the best, I guess, remastered 3D he's ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
E.g., a movie that's not shot in 3D, but has kind of gone back and they play with it and try and make it 3D.
Right.
He said it was the best of that he's ever seen.
Wow.
And I completely agree.
Okay.
Mean, there were points where it's like, I can't believe they didn't shoot that way.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, Jaws.
Yeah, and I think one reason why Jaws
out.
is up here is the music.
The music.
John Williams' score, which is
Yeah.
one of the greatest scores ever for Jaws,
Yeah.
really made that movie go from a great movie, or a good movie, to a great movie.
Yeah. And you got to think, John Williams, I mean, he's put together some extremely musically complex pieces before.
Mm-hmm.
But this piece, and this is probably one of the top 3 or 4 pieces of music he's composed that he's known for, along with Star Wars and probably a few others. This piece, it's just people going, da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. I mean, you got to think, he's on the set all day long, can't get a good take, he's had a long day, and he's just like, okay, screw it, play whatever.
Yeah, just one guy, just goof around and we'll record it and see what happens.
Yeah, and one guy just starts doing that, and he's like, I like that, keep doing it.
That's what it seems like happened, definitely.
I mean, it just, compared to all of his other pieces, it just seems so simplistic, but yet 40 years later, almost, anytime you hear that music, it
kind of creeps you out.
You know there's a shark coming.
Yeah.
I mean, it just people that have never seen the movie Jaws know the shark's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And for that matter, sharks. Before this movie, people were not afraid of sharks.
That is true. That is true.
I mean, when a movie that you make can create a nationwide phobia of a specific creature, I mean, there are not very many things that could do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not sure I would have Jaws on my list. I completely respect the choice.
Okay.
I mean, it was innovative. It was really good for the time that it was done. I mean,
Right.
40 years ago, the effects that they used were actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's just movies like that don't age as well as, like Casablanca. There's nothing in it that would cause it to not age well.
Right.
But when you have special effects, when you have, a robotic shark or however they did that,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff, it's going to show its age later on.
Definitely.
And you have to know that going in, but the innovation on that movie, I completely respect that choice.
Okay. Well, we'll move on. That was number 5
All right.
on Empire.com's list.
Okay.
Number 4, The Shawshank Redemption. No surprise there.
Right.
We'll just go next one. Number 3. Here's one that I thought was surprising, but I agree with. Star Wars Episode 5. And right before this, Micah came in. He was like, "You guys are probably going to talk about Star Wars," and you were like, "Nah, I doubt it." And I was like, "I knew this one was coming along," because Episode 5, which I think is the best one, I think it's generally considered the best one.
I think it is too. Here's why I would not agree. Here's why I would not put that in my top 5.
It's a sequel?
Or my top 10. No, not because it's a sequel. It's Godfather Part 2.
Well, yeah.
I would not put this in my top 10 because quality-wise, this is not on par with the movies we've been talking about. The thing that gets Star Wars so much great recognition, and I mean, Jaws is kind of the same way. And if you're going by this alone, then yes, it's there. Is innovation.
Right.
It was an extremely innovative movie. But that being said, the quality, really the acting, I mean, there's nothing in that really is just absolutely breathtaking to me. I mean, they're all great movies, but
Right.
but I think of them not as great quality movies. I think of them as great movies to watch.
That's a different point, but yeah, I understand it.
Right. They're movies that you pull out the popcorn and you watch with friends. They're not movies that you sit with a pen and pad and you're like, oh my gosh, look at what the cinematography guy did here.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The movies, they're not technically unsound, but they're not great. And so I would disagree with that choice.
Okay.
I kind of see where they're coming from, but I do not agree with their choice to put it there.
Okay, then you probably won't agree with their number 2 choice either.
Is it another Star Wars movie?
It is not.
Okay.
But Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah.
I would have to think about that.
And
honestly, I would be a lot more comfortable putting that on the list than I would any Star Wars movie.
Okay.
Because there's not as much special effects in that movie. I mean, it's more real effects, real people, and
it's kind of, as my friend Mark said, he said it's one of the very first action movies that really, like, all the action movies that are made now are like look back at Indiana Jones.
Right. And that's like when I say that, I would give this serious consideration. That's going through my mind as well.
Yeah.
Because what were the 3 movies he said? Die Hard, the first one.
He said Die Hard,
the Terminator movies,
2, and Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones and the
3 like staple action movies.
And I mean, when you think about it, when you really analyze kind of the action movies that come out today, every single one of them, without exception, takes a lot of traits from one of these or more than one of these movies. And so by that standpoint, yeah, I actually would be okay with having that in a top 5 list.
Okay.
Towards the lower end, probably.
Right. I wouldn't have it at number 2, but it definitely got consideration. Also for my list, it kind of did.
Yeah, because it's got 3 things going for it. It's got Harrison Ford, who's gone on to become an iconic actor, one of the Hollywood greats, when he was still fairly young. So that's cool to see. I mean, you don't see, like, Morgan Freeman, you don't see movies of him when he's 25 years old. But, Harrison Ford here, this is when his acting career is still fairly young. And getting to see him just own a role and completely take it over in the context of a movie that itself is iconic, and not only iconic in that people quote the movie, but Hollywood has imitated this movie in some form or fashion ever since it came out.
Yeah.
So by those qualifications, I would totally have this in my top 5.
Okay. Then
so I'm happy with that.
Okay, and then at number 1, what do you think it's going to be? Number 1. Got nothing?
I'm not sure.
It is The Godfather.
Okay.
Which
that's
The Godfather's pretty much been mentioned on every single list we've talked about so far.
Right, with the exception of Ebert.
With the exception of Ebert, which kind of shocked me, but
yeah.
Now that you've mentioned what he said about it, that makes sense. Okay, so that was Empire, and now I have a couple other lists, but I'm just going to skip over those. And then I'm going to go to AFI's top, and then we'll go to our top. And we'll just talk about our top 5 for the second half of the show.
Okay.
So to finish off the first half, we're going to go AFI.com, which, in my opinion, AFI is kind of with the exception of some exclusive websites and stuff, it's pretty much the one that you want to look at for pretty solid sources when it comes to movies.
Right.
They come out with a 10 every 10 years, like a top 10 sports movies, top 10 action movies. And every 10 years they do a new list. And they did this new list in 2008, I want to say. So it hasn't been updated since then. But this is what they had for their top 5. At number 5, in my opinion, the greatest musical of all time, they had Singing in the Rain.
Okay.
Which, when it came out, I mean, even now, it is just a fantastic movie. The way that they do the dancing, I can't even imagine how much time went into the choreography of that movie.
Yeah.
Like, they had to hire dancers that could act, and then they had a great story and everything about it. Fantastic film. Number 4, they have Raging Bull.
Okay.
Which, I knew it was on there.
That's popped up in a lot of the lists.
That's come up a couple times.
Yeah.
And it's probably the least popular movie that we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
But again, it's Martin Scorsese. Great movie. And it didn't get the credit it deserved at the time. It was voted by the Film Critics Association as the number 1 movie, or not number 1. It was, gosh, how did it work? Oh yeah, number 1 movie of the 1980s. Over Raiders of the Lost Ark and a couple others. So, great film. Highly recommend watching Raging Bull. Number 3, they have Casablanca, which this is actually the first time we've talked about it. You mentioned it really quickly about not aging.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really surprised that this is the only list out of all the ones I wrote down that has Casablanca in the top 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean...
It's actually the only Bogart film that we've talked about.
It is, and I don't know, I feel like... Now, this is just a hypothesis. Hypothesis. I lost the ability to speak there for a second. This is just a guess of mine. How about that?
Okay, that makes
stick to the single syllable words.
Easy words.
Yeah. This is just a guess of mine, but I think that there's so much nostalgia surrounding those movies that people overcompensate by not mentioning them. Because they're so far from the cinematic norms in our day and age. Like, when we think of a great movie, the first movie that comes to mind for me is The Godfather, which is still pretty out there. But I would say for the average fan, you're thinking something, if you haven't seen 1,000 movies,
right?
You're thinking something along the lines of, Saving Private Ryan or
Shawshank Redemption.
Inception, Shawshank Redemption,
right?
Something along those lines. And those are movies that, even those are kind of hard to watch by our standards today, in that, they do slowly develop and they do kind of, Saving Private Ryan, it slowly develops after the first 23 minutes.
Yeah.
But point being, they're kind of slow-moving movies. And really, that's not what we have the palate for anymore. We have the palate as a collective culture for watching movies that they get right into it. Quite frankly, they treat the audience like they're infantile, and that they just spoon-feed you, oh, well, the killer was really this person, and to prove it, we're going to leave this piece of evidence and this piece of evidence, and
too many, like, they spoon feed you,
right?
So much where it's just like, come on, let me think about the end of the movie and go, what really happened? That's what makes these great movies great,
right? Is
the fact that you don't know what happens, and it's up to you to decide. And if you watch them 20 times, you might be able to finally pick up on a little hint that will make the whole movie make sense. And that's why I love Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
Is he still refers back to, especially in Inception, and The Prestige, Memento, like all these movies, you don't know about the ending of the movie. You don't exactly understand it, and I love that. And Casablanca, like you were saying, older films, people just want them spoon-fed now, and the older films are like, no.
Right. And really, that's, if you want great quality film, that's what you have to look for, is movies that, you're going to have a harder time watching them, but it's more rewarding to watch them. Yeah. And I don't know. I take serious issue with the way that Hollywood treats a lot of movies today, but I understand why they do it. They're in it to make money. They're not in it to make classics. And if they come along with a classic, good for them. But they don't, classics don't pay the bills. Dollars do. So that's kind of the attitude they take. And it's a shame because we don't see movies being made like, these great old movies that are consistently on your lists.
Right.
But that being said, I feel like people that are serious critics, there's so much nostalgia surrounding, Citizen Kane, Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon is another one.
Yep.
So much nostalgia surrounding them that they overcompensate.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, well, we don't want to jump all the way back there. We want to, we don't want to be biased. We want to include some newer movies. And in doing that, they kind of overstep themselves.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so what you end up with is going through 5 top 10 lists before you ever hear the mention of a movie with Humphrey Bogart.
Right. And I'm going to mention real quick, there's a big difference between a best movie and a greatest movie.
Right.
Because I think of a best movie as like perfect movie, no mistakes.
Yeah.
A great movie is a movie that impacts cinema and is perfect with no mistakes. You know? So like a movie which, in my opinion, Tree of Life, nobody cares about the movie. It hasn't impacted anybody since it came out. Now, it's only like 2 years old. But that's why I wouldn't put it on my great movies list, because it hasn't done anything yet. And that's why movies since 2000, there are very few that I would even consider for a great movies list because they haven't impacted anything. Whereas a best movie, regardless of who's seen it. So, because there's so many, not short films, but like independent films that I would put on my best movies list that I wouldn't put on great movies because they didn't, without them, the movie world would still be the exact same it is today.
Right.
And I think a great movie has to impact cinema. And so that's kind of the difference. So when we talk best movies and great movies, this is kind of a mix of both, I guess. But this is more great movies, I would say.
Well, this is definitely great movies.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a show that was favorite movies. This is going through and trying to find the quality and trying to put together a list that really, it's not necessarily our favorite movies, but the movies that really, they take the best of film.
Right.
And that's what this is trying to do.
Mm-hmm. So then at number 2 on AFI's list is The Godfather. Again.
Right.
We've mentioned it every list so far.
Yep.
So we'll just go ahead and skip over that. And then at number 1 is Citizen Kane, which I can't remember exactly what list it is, but it's like there was a magazine that comes out every 10 years, I think, that lists the greatest movies of all time. And Citizen Kane was number 1 on that list all the way until this last year when it got beat by Vertigo.
Mm-hmm.
And so Citizen Kane, consistently considered one of the greatest of all time. I just watched it like a month ago for the first time.
Yeah.
It's a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is so good. The way that the camera work is just fantastic. So we're going to go ahead and jump into our own personal lists. I wrote down 6 because I couldn't limit to 5. I don't know how many you wrote down. But do you want to go ahead and start first?
Sure. Are we just going to take this one at a time? Or?
Yeah, let's just do one at a time because
Okay.
we don't have that many. So.
All right. Well, I'll get the obvious one out of the way so that we have our big, exciting choices there at the end of the show. I put The Godfather 1 and 2 as one entry because this is not the time and place to try and fight out which one of those is better. We've done that before.
Right.
They're both extremely quality movies. You could argue as long as the day is nigh trying to figure out which one of those is the better quality movie.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, they're...
And the only reason I would say Godfather, real quickly, out of the two right now for this list, is that Godfather came before Godfather Part 2. It was the first of the two. And so that's the only reason why I would put it above it.
Okay.
Like, if they were flipped, then I would say Godfather Part 2. But, because Godfather Part 1, I had to put that one above Part 2. But, so on number 6 on my list, I have Godfather Part 2.
Okay.
So I'll just go ahead and cut that one off.
Okay.
Do you have yours listed 1 through 5, or do you just kind of have them written down?
I just kind of have them written down.
Okay.
The Godfather 1 and 2, they're not necessarily anywhere in my, they're not ranked, but they would definitely be towards the top. I mean, all of these would.
Okay.
So just kind of have that in mind.
Okay. Well, give us a couple more, or another one real quick.
Okay. I'll say Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
I almost put it on my top 5.
Okay.
But I just couldn't for some reason, but...
John Stafford is irritated at us for putting Pulp Fiction on the list because he probably couldn't follow the plot.
That's exactly the reason.
He's poking his head in the booth and just giving us the chopping throat sign. But I'm going to ignore him and keep on talking. Pulp Fiction puts together one of the greatest casts of all time. Mm-hmm. It's directed by one of the greatest directors of all time. It innovated in ways that I really don't feel like any movie in Hollywood, or at least not any massively... He's trying to storm the studio right now.
Now he's trying to get in. John, leave us alone.
I don't think that there's been any movie come out since Pulp Fiction that has been as innovative in the way that Hollywood does cinema.
Agreed.
I don't think that there's any. And I know it's a fairly recent movie, and we'll see how the
94. That's not that recent anymore.
Well, relative to the rest of this list.
Okay,
yes.
okay, agreed.
But we'll see how 40, 50 years of time shines on this movie and what, what its legacy is after we're old men. But the time being, I would say that it's up there, and I would say it's probably my latest movie that's going to be on my list.
Okay. I have one more that's before that, but before I go there, Pulp Fiction was also, when we did our list of most unremakeable movies of all time, it was our number 1.
Right.
Which is also why it's considered so good.
Oh, you don't think that Michael Bay could get some people together and remake that?
Oh, Michael Bay definitely could. If anybody... he would hire Nicolas Cage and...
Sean Bean.
Well, no. Don't go there. Don't put Sean Bean with Michael Bay in the same sentence, okay? Anyways, my number 5 greatest movie of all time, this one you're probably going to disagree with me on, is The Return of the King.
No.
Okay.
I don't disagree.
The reason I have it there, that one came out in 2003.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I was debating whether or not I should, is because it's definitely pretty recent.
Right.
But like we said last week, if you had to pick one movie that defined our generation, I picked Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. And if I had to pick one of them, I would pick Return of the King. It won 11 Academy Awards, 11 for 11, and it pretty much showed that you don't need special effects to make a movie good. They used miniatures, they used... everything about that movie is just great. And then the way that they filmed all three at the same time, like everything about it, the way they filmed it, and it's constantly referred to in script writing books of how to write a screenplay all the time. So it's a great movie, one of my all-time favorites. Brad Johnson, there you go. You'll be happy I put that in my top 5. It's his number 1 choice.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's at my number 5. What do you got?
Are we just going one at a time, or?
Sure.
Because I've already named off a couple.
Go ahead and keep. You can name a couple more unless you only have like 3 left.
Well, I've got 3 left.
Okay, then I'll go get them quick.
I listed 5.
Oh, you're right. You did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you give us one more? Or do you have it made
got
up?
It. My number 4, greatest movie of all time. Instead of Raging Bull, I have Taxi Driver.
Okay.
Taxi Driver. Everybody knows if you listen to our show at all, it's the movie that got me into film.
Yeah.
And everything about that movie is perfect. Mm-hmm. The cinematography, the music, the acting. Oh my goodness, the acting. And I just feel like it was Scorsese's first big movie, and everything since then is just like, I don't know. Everything about Taxi Driver was great. It's hard to figure out why you'd put it above Raging Bull, but I just do, because I think it was because it came before.
Right.
I think it's a greater movie, and I think they're equally good in terms of quality, but in terms of greatness, I would have to put Taxi Driver.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've talked about before that, it's, to me, the mark of a great movie is a movie that there's not a whole lot of noise going on in the plot, and it's something where you can really just watch an actor work. And, with a lot of actors, that cannot be done.
Right.
A lot of actors and actresses cannot be the only big player in a movie. Robert De Niro is not one of those people. He can take a movie like Taxi Driver, take it and make it his own, and make it to the point where he single-handedly makes this movie a great movie. Mm-hmm. There's nothing about this movie, really, that would be great if the acting was just okay.
Yeah.
Because it relies so much on a strong lead role that if you don't have that, the whole premise of the movie falls apart. Because you have to be able to really kind of... I don't want to say empathize. I really can't even say sympathize, because you can't sympathize with the character. I mean, he's pretty out there. But in terms of, like, just the it's like a morbid curiosity. It's like you're watching 2 trains about to smash into each other, and you want to look away, and you're like, I feel like I'm a bad person for getting something out of this.
Yep. But
I've got to watch. And that's basically what Taxi Driver is. You're watching this guy's life crumble, and you can't look away. Knocked down my can there.
Yeah, and I would say the modern-day version of that, and we've mentioned it before, is There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes, that's the movie that I thought of.
The movie is like as slow as can be, and there's no second plot to the movie. There's one plot.
Right.
And same with Taxi Driver. I would say Taxi Driver is a little more multi-plot than There Will Be Blood.
How so?
That
like what would be the multiple plots?
Well, the fact that he has there's the main girl, Betsy, that he likes.
Right.
And then there's also Jodie Foster's character.
Okay.
There's the 2 characters that he simultaneously connects with and kind of relates them to each other. And in There Will Be Blood, it's literally the main guy and the like preacher kid.
And his son.
I guess and his son. So I guess it's about the exact same.
Yeah,
actually.
I would say it's about the exact same.
And so that's why Paul Thomas Anderson is becoming one of my favorite directors right now. Mm-hmm. He brings it back to the old school Scorsese feel.
Right.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, hit us with another one.
All right, this is the 3rd movie on my top 5. Again, in no way are these ranked.
Okay.
They're just 5 movies that I felt stand high up on the mountain as the greatest of all time.
Okay, so we're like reaching into a hat to pull each one out, so it doesn't matter about the rank.
Right. I mean, these are... I would say that these would definitely get serious consideration for my top 5. It's really hard to even make top 5 that you stand by.
It is.
Because, I mean, Ebert, who's seen, or has seen, rest in peace,
Thousands of movies.
every movie under the sun, yeah. He flip-flopped some with his positions on movies.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just part of, movies reflect life. And if you watch 1,000 movies, movies are going to affect you differently based on where you are in your life. And so, this list, I've tried to make it objective, but the reality is it's probably fairly subjective.
Right, and every list is going to have a little bias.
Right.
That's the way it is, because some people see a movie better than others, or not as good, or...
Case in point, The Graduate.
Exactly. Ugh.
It's still like 17th on AFI's list, the updated list.
I just don't... okay, anyways, that's a different story.
Yeah, we'll talk about that some other time. To Kill a Mockingbird with Gregory Peck.
Really?
Yes. This is my favorite book of all time.
Okay.
And I almost shuddered to watch the movie because I was like, I know Gregory Peck is outstanding. I know that it's a classic movie, but I don't want anything to ruin the book for me. And if anything, this brought the book to life. Have you had any exposure to...
I have not read the book or seen the movie.
Oh, man, you've got to get on that.
I know. And my couple people on Facebook did mention To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
But it wasn't up there above the others, so I didn't mention it. But
yeah. Yeah, I definitely... This is one I stand by. This is one that, a few of these, it's like, you could switch, X for Y, and the list would still be strong. And, I mean, I'll mention that as it comes. I would stand by this in my top 5 regardless.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like this is a movie that... I mean, it accomplishes a feat that's almost impossible in Hollywood. Adaptation of a great book that doesn't disappoint the people that love the book.
Yeah. And that's why it was such a good such a loved movie also. Is people were like, "Oh my goodness."
Right. And you got to say something about Gregory Peck here. One of the iconic actors of all time. AFI had him maybe at number 1. Yeah, on their number 1 or on their top 100 heroes and villains list. Where they listed off the 100 greatest villains and the 100 greatest heroes.
Right.
His character in this movie, Atticus Finch, was the number 1 hero.
Really?
So...
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's an iconic movie, but you've got to... you've got to understand just everything about this movie. I mean, it's not a movie that gets talked about a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
it really doesn't. It gets overlooked by a lot, like all the Bogart films.
Relative to like the Bogart films, Citizen Kane, a lot of these movies, it kind of they're like, yeah, it's a good movie, and that's all. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is one of the greatest movies of all time for 2 reasons. Like I said, one, the almost unachievable feat that it accomplishes of adapting a book that is not just any book, but a beloved classic into a movie that the fans of the book love. And also, just the great acting here. I mean, the iconic performance that, Gregory Peck, I was like, these characters, this is what I was thinking before I watched the movie. Man, none of these characters are going to be, or a lot of these characters anyway, going to be really, really hard to find someone that can bring them to life in the way that the author does. And Gregory Peck does it with the strongest part of the strongest character in the book, in my opinion. He masterfully plays Atticus. Outstanding. It's... I could babble on about this forever, but I have a deep sentimental connection to this movie. And so, I mean, in that, yes, I'm probably biased, but I feel like this is a movie that definitely deserves its ranking in the top 5. And
yeah.
So.
Okay, I'm going to read something that Micah just sent me.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. He said, snubs list, okay? This is a list that got snubbed. This is a complete joke. But he said Transformers trilogy, all of the Ernest movies, All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, the first Incredible Hulk, The Last Airbender, and Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Oh, so good.
Somewhere in Heaven Ebert is having like a
He's dying again.
Yeah, he's having like a spiritual, metaphysical heart attack right now because of Micah's list.
Oh.
Moving on.
Yeah, and moving on, I'm going to mention my number 3 movie. This one was hard because there are so many by this director that I could have picked, but I felt like this one was the choice. Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock.
Okay.
I wanted to pick Vertigo, but I saw Psycho first, and for some reason I just feel like Psycho is I can't say a better movie, because that's kind of impossible to say, but I enjoyed it more, and I felt like it impacted like what modern day scary and horror movies are. Like, it was the first one that really scared people, and then after that everybody's kind of like, oh, you can scare people, you know? And then the score, people know the score from Psycho, you know, even if they've never seen the movie. And you have to mention a Hitchcock movie, I feel like, in your top 5 of all time. And I felt like this one was up there. I would say Rear Window. Rear Window might be my favorite. It was the first one I ever saw. Mm-hmm. But Psycho definitely deserves a mention here. Just a great movie.
Agreed.
And the cinematography. That's the one thing that stuck with me for so long after watching the movie is the cinematography in that movie. Just great.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to say, going right off of yours, I'm going to say North by Northwest by Alfred Hitchcock.
Okay. I have not seen that one.
Okay. This is one of the most classic plots of all time. It stars Cary Grant, James Mason, who is that actress? Ava Marie Saint, who I don't know much about, but Cary Grant and James Mason, two of the greats. So the acting automatically, and this is a plot that I don't really want to talk about it, because if people haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it for them. But this is one of the most iconic plots of all time. I mean, I've seen it parodied and remade and attempted to be mimicked probably a dozen times.
Okay.
And if you haven't seen it, I don't think that it's the most creative movie by Alfred Hitchcock, but then it's hard to tell what is, because all of his movies that, you know, the really iconic ones, Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, and North by Northwest, I would put that in that same group. They're so mimicked and so often referenced and recreated that it's really hard to figure out which one is the most original, because all of them show such great originality. But this one, I'll say that the plot, I've seen it, I can say confidently, I've seen this either mimicked or spoofed or parodied, or people attempted to remake it in some way at least a half dozen times. And that speaks to just how iconic of a plot this is. And the way that Hitchcock, obviously, the way that he brings stuff together, it's incredible.
Yeah, it definitely is. Hitchcock, in my opinion, greatest director of all time.
I would agree.
I like
I wanted
Scorsese
to think about
more.
that for a second, but I agree.
I just can't think of another director that every movie impacted cinema, and every movie is considered a great. Well, not every. I'll take that back.
Yeah.
All his main ones.
Yeah.
There's some that have come out with some really good movies, but they've only come out with like 2. You know?
Yeah.
Hitchcock came out with like 8.
Yeah.
That you could put on this top 25 list if you really wanted to.
Yeah. 15 years after Scorsese is dead, it will be a lot easier to compare him.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
Right now, I mean, he's still living, making movies, good movies. But, Hitchcock produced a ton of movies, and a bunch of the movies that he did just happened to become some of the most iconic movies of all time.
Yeah.
I mean, I listed 4 of them, and there's others, really, that could be considered in that area. So, yeah, Hitchcock is good. That is the moral of the story.
That's the moral of the story. Okay, my number 2 greatest movie of all time. It's my favorite black and white movie, 12 Angry Men.
I knew that was going to be on your list somewhere.
And I don't know what it is about 12 Angry Men that I like so much. I think it's the fact that they can have a whole 90-minute movie in one room, and you don't find that claustrophobic or odd. You don't even think about it. Halfway through the movie, you totally forget that it's in one room.
Yeah.
And there's one camera shot. Sometimes these movies, Psycho has one, and 12 Angry Men has one, where it's like these iconic shots. The first scene, once they get in that room, is 5 minutes long without... The first shot is 5 minutes long without a cut. 5 minutes. I timed it. That's just something you don't see anymore.
Yeah. That's the creativity there on the part of the cinematographer and also the director-producer to allow something like that to go on for that length of time, to be like, yeah, we'll go with this, we'll roll with this. And just to see it unfold. And, yeah, the acting, obviously, with Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
I mean, among a bunch of others. I mean, yeah, I could go down the list here. That Lee Cobb, Jack Warden, Jack Klugman, Ed Begley. You've got a bunch of these actors here that, their names just crop up when you're looking at the best movies.
Right.
Consensus best movies of all time, their names just crop up in the acting credits. And, yeah, this is an incredible movie, just in how simple it is, and yet how compelling it is to watch.
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about, short films that I want to film or anything like that, I have constantly gone back to 12 Angry Men and thought, I wonder if I could do that. Make it just a short 5-minute film. But it would be so hard to do it in one room and keep your attention, yet, let alone for 90 minutes. And yet, people have tried to copy it, and there have been a couple, I can't think of any off the top of my head, that have actually successfully copied it.
They straight up did copy it in 1997 with Jack Lemmon.
Oh, really?
And Tony Danza. Wow.
Was the movie any good?
Interesting. See, I can't find anywhere like reception of it. If I go to an IMDb, 7.6.
Okay, that's actually not a bad rating.
Oh, and this was a television, this was a TV movie too. So,
excuse me,
I didn't realize that factors in as well. It was directed by the guy that directed The French Connection and The Exorcist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's a solid director.
Yeah, I was just looking at the acting credits. They got Jack Lemmon, they got George Scott, Tony Danza. I'll just go through the list. Hume Cronin, Edward James Olmos, Ossie Davis, James Gandolfini.
Okay.
There's a few others on here, but
yeah,
there's some really, really strong acting credits in this new one. There are some really strong credits in the old one, but
yeah,
obviously the original, you can't copy that first time that you see something like that.
Right, and so in my opinion, 12 Angry Men, it's my favorite black and white movie, and it's also, I think, second greatest movie of all time. So that's what I got. What's your last one?
My last one is The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. With Humphrey Bogart.
I would never have guessed that ever.
Have you heard of it or seen
I've heard of it. I just have not seen it.
Okay.
And I really wanted to, because it won. No, it did not win Best Picture.
No, it did not. But it's a fantastic movie. Came out in 1948. It's got Bogart, Walter Houston, Tim Holt, and Bruce Bennett. There are only 4 real actors in this movie.
Okay.
That aren't just like extra pieces. Set in the 1920s violence of the Mexican Revolution. It's about Bogart's character as a gold miner trying to mine for gold in the Sierra Madre Mountains in Mexico, and just what goes on. This movie has it all. It's got plot twists. It's got great acting. It's got a really, really compelling overall plot, not just twists, but throughout the movie, you don't feel like turning it off.
Now, why would you put that one above Casablanca or Maltese Falcon? Or even African Queen?
African Queen I thought was too slow.
Okay.
It won the...
It won Best Picture.
I don't think it won... Did it win Best Picture?
I believe it did.
Okay. I knew that Bogart won Best Actor for it.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure if it won Best Picture. It may well have. But I thought that was too slow. I thought that was almost like a pity Oscar at that point.
Oh.
Because it was so late in his career. And his acting performance was outstanding, but it's not better than Casablanca or Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
Right.
The reason that I put this up here is the way that it translates into today. better than Maltese Falcon or Casablanca do. If you've seen it, this movie is faster moving and is more interesting to watch. Like where you're not just watching it because you feel like you should be watching it,
Right.
but where you're watching it because you're legitimately interested. This movie has one of those plots that it could easily have been made in the late 1970s instead of the 1940s.
Okay.
So that counts for something to me. When a movie can translate just as easily from 1948 to 2008, that's got to be recognized.
That is definitely true. So I'm going to say that my number one movie of all time,
All right.
if you haven't guessed it by now, then you should think other stuff. But it is The Godfather. I think it's the best movie. And we mentioned it a minute ago, like, do you pick number one or number two? I pick number one. I own number one. I don't own number two.
Yeah.
Like, I like it more.
Yeah, I like number one more, but if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick number two. That's me personally.
Okay.
In terms of quality. But yeah, it's the iconic classic movie.
Right.
I mean,
and it's like the gangster movie. It's the, you have the Michael Corleone's like story, his whole life story.
Right.
You have, or his transformation from good to bad.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not really bad yet, but getting there. You have Marlon Brando's amazing performance.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about that movie, something about it, it's on a different scale, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of greatest movie of all time, I don't even think twice about putting Godfather at number one.
Yeah.
I just say Godfather, and then I'll work down from there. Like, just for some reason, I think the time it came out, and we mentioned this before, it's still relevant today, and yet it was relevant back when it came out. So it's like it bridges the gap perfectly, whereas some movies don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I kind of feel like they're kind of dying off as these all-time greats, if you know what I mean. And I'm actually wrong. I was wrong. African Queen did not win Best Picture.
Yeah.
It was not even nominated, actually. So I was thinking of a different movie. I think was it Out of Africa that won Best Picture? I'm pretty sure that one was the one.
Which one?
Out of Africa?
I think it was.
Yeah, I think that's the one I was thinking of. So, wrong movie. My bad. So, yeah. So that concludes our lists. Is that all you got?
Concludes our year.
Concludes our year. That is true. Thank you so much for listening, if you do listen. If you don't listen, then this doesn't apply to you because you won't ever hear it. But we will be posting this on YouTube, youtube.com/Thecrackednation. And I do YouTube reviews on there of movies and stuff throughout the summer. And then come next year, I plan on doing this radio show again.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you're still in for doing it, Tyler.
If my schedule allows.
Yeah, and I'll try and it'll probably be at a different time. Actually, I guarantee you it'll be at a different time because of school schedules and all that. But we thank you so much for listening. We've had a blast. I know I have. It's been so much fun. And so this is the last show of the year. This is the Cracked Nation on KOCC Eagle Broadcasting. We thank you for listening, and we're out.